Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to this week's episode of Unfiltered Podcast. I'm back here with Ben, and we will continue with the questions we always ask each other. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Good to be back. Thanks for joining us for another episode.
Yeah.
As we always like to do, we're going to kick off today's episode with a fire round.
Yeah.
We're going to ask each other a couple of yes or no questions. These questions have not been pre-rehearsed. We've not discussed these questions beforehand.
No.
This is a spontaneous segment. We'd like for the audience to let us know, to follow along and give us your responses to these same questions as well.
Yeah.
With that, let's go ahead and kick it off.
All right. My first question for you today is, do you approve of hotwiffing? Do you know what?
No idea what that is.
Okay. All right. Let me give you a brief context.
But no, I do not.
All right. Hotwiffing is basically men letting their wives sleep with other men to keep their marriages together, to make them happier.
Well, then I'm changing my answer. I fully support that.
Okay. So you approve of hotwiffing?
I approve of hot wifing. You heard it here first.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
My question to you, would you, for the price of, let's say, $10 billion, make a deal with the devil? 10 billion. You could start your own AI company with that.
No for now.
It's turning down 10 billion.
No for now.
All right.
All right, I don't know if you've been paying attention to what has been happening in El Salvador in the past, 3 years, with President Bukele's new prison system. Do you approve of the prison system he's using in El Salvador?
Contingent, no. I'm no expert on the system in El Salvador, but
Okay, I'll give you more context on it as we progress. Yeah.
okay. Is it a mistake for the United States to engage in Middle Eastern conflict?
No, but it's a conditional no.
Okay.
It's a conditional no. All right. In the round of the fire round, I asked you about hotwifing, which is basically letting your wife sleep with other men for her own satisfaction. Some men do enjoy watching it. But yeah, it's a trendy thing right now. I don't know how you haven't heard of this, but it's trending. So do you approve of that? You said yes. Why?
Hey, I don't hate on anything that may work for certain couples. It wouldn't work for me personally. I'm sort of the. It's in my nature that sex is not a sport in my mind, and I see more and more in today's culture, and it's not even just today's culture, but it's sort of an attitude that I've seen among a lot of men and certain social groups in particular, that is the way that their sort of sexual urges, can we say, become expressed, is through needing some sort of entertainment of sex. Sort of taking in my mind, sort of takes the intimacy out of the act of sex when you sort of turn it into this game. Whether it's, and by the way, there are things like this that happen right here in Minneapolis where there's sex parties. There's massive warehouses.
And people take their wives there?
Yeah, couples go there. Anybody goes there, but they're hugely popular. It's sort of more underground type event, but I've been invited to those. Haven't attended. I'm sure it'd be interesting to observe. But my whole point being this idea of sex becoming sort of like a game or a sport. It wouldn't work for me personally. The reason being that it takes, for me, intimacy, it takes some level of, I guess, emotional connection with a person. So I would not be good in a situation where I'm trying to have a sexual encounter with a stranger. And I feel like in the example that you gave of a husband, wanting to watch, that's a thing for some guys, right? They like to be the observer in a certain encounter. I don't know that would get me off. It's not my style.
Don't you think that if we encourage this idea, which might sound really nice right now, down the line it might start changing the emotional dynamics in most relationships?
But
because
I think,
like you said, sex is. It should be. I don't know if it is, but it should be more emotional than just like a sport. And when you let your partner sleep with another person, you're opening the doors for them to get emotionally involved with that person. Don't you think it opens the room for that?
Yes, but my assumption is that the reason that door opened in the first place is because there's something missing in that relationship. And so the types of couples who are likely to engage in something like that are not already intimately satisfied with one another. And that's why they're looking outside of their relationship for something external. And I think we should be real about that, because I think that's the case with probably a majority of relationships, is that, look, at the end of the day, we as humans are wired to want to continually spread the seed. Men in particular are wired that way. I mean, this is an evolutionary trait that we carry, that as men, as more
primordial state,
alpha, the more dominant type men, in particular, we have this urge. And so there's this notion of men, thinking with their penis, right?
Their other head. They call it their other head.
The other head. That's a very real thing, right? And so, like, there may be the impression that this is some kind of excuse that, this is something, this is just weakness of men. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, this is a very real thing. And what's kind of comical about it is that throughout history, and very public instances of men, prominent men being disloyal to their wives or their significant others. We have Kobe Bryant went through it very publicly. Tiger Woods, of course, very notoriously.
I even heard Jay-Z had something back in the day.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
They made sure to both make albums about it and make a lot of money from that. But yeah, Jay-Z very publicly. Becky with the good hair, right? Is that who it was? We don't know. But the point being, when this happens, we all act as though we don't understand it. Like, the media and everyone who addresses it will be like, oh, does Tiger Woods have a sex addiction problem? And the funny thing about it is, no, this is how men are wired. And
okay.
I think
I have a quick follow-up question for you.
Sure, but I think that a lot of men, when given the opportunity, if they have the money and the power, will fully take advantage of that opportunity to satisfy those urges by sleeping with
other women.
A lot of women.
Okay, so do you think men are polygamous in nature, and it's just natural for us?
Yes.
Okay.
And I say that not to say that I don't believe in monogamous relationships, because I absolutely do. I think that's the place that human culture has evolved to, is that is the best and healthiest family structure.
Yeah,
is a monogamous couple, a family raising children together. I do think that's, and there are plenty of healthy exceptions to that. We have same-sex marriages or raising adopted children. Those are all very important and very valid as well.
So the whole idea is both parents and a child.
Right.
That's the foundation of modern civilization. But
yes,
parents and a child. Okay.
I believe so. And so are men polygamous in nature? And scientifically, yes. There is a very real physiological piece to our biology that gives us, even once you're married, right, you don't stop being a human being. And so you still have to deal with these urges, these temptations. We've talked about on the show, the kind of the problems in relationships. A lot of young people who get married too soon or get married and think that's going to solve their issues are ignoring that fact, I believe, that just because you put a ring on, you don't stop being human, right? You're going to still have the same urges and same temptations around you. It has to be on you to make the mindset shift to decide, I'm going to be monogamous. Because, yes, our nature is something different. That's a very personal decision that we have to make as men, as women as well, to decide, we're going to be
but going against nature is difficult. It's extremely difficult.
Of course. But we do it every day.
Nature, and we can prove that this is our nature, then going against it shouldn't even be recommended. Well, it's hell.
I mean, but in a civil society, we are forced to do that every single minute of every day of our lives. Mm-hmm. If we were to go with all of our urges, right? You can't just...
It would be a catastrophe, yes.
No, you can't just go into the office and...
I know.
And you can see where that could go, yeah. To satisfy whether it's sexual urges or, any type of biological urge that you may have. We have very cultural, specific expectations as to how we satisfy those urges, and not doing very publicly inappropriate things.
So do you think, sorry, I know we are kind of like going a little bit too deep into this, but I need to ask you one more follow-up question. Do you think because we are stating this fact here that sex for men, being polygamous in sexual relationships for men is natural, do you think we should stop persecuting great men that maybe have made a few mistakes in the past, excluding rape, because rape is not something we can forgive? Yeah.
Right.
Like step out of their marriages, and we should not make their entire reputation.
I mean, I think it's interesting because we have forgiven a great many men throughout history. You could look at any number of political figures or great figures throughout history. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr.
Absolutely.
These men are known for their incredible and major contributions to the world and to cultures, to freedom and independence. But these men also had personal lives where they had, those exact type of issues. Martin Luther King Jr. slept with a great many women outside of his marriage. Mm-hmm. He was married to Coretta Scott King, of course. But we know this because the FBI, who is likely responsible for his assassination, were recording him, basically, making sure to keep a journal of dirt on Martin Luther King Jr. because they saw him as a threat at the time in the 60s. In the case of Gandhi, right, regarded as one of the most legendary peacemakers, one of the most wise men to walk the earth. He was also a man, and he was married throughout his entire fame and through his prime, but he also, in some cases, by all accounts, took advantage of his ability, even though he was supposed to be celibate, was actually the thing. But he would actually test his strength of celibacy by laying next to other women at night, and admitted that in some cases that
He slept with them.
that he had moments of weakness.
It defeats the whole purpose of being celibate. But yeah, continue.
Yeah. So, but I mean, all of this to make the point that we do make exceptions for men, and it's an understood thing in some cases. Like, in certain cases, it's like we understand these are great men, but they also have the same types of, urges and temptations that all men have.
Yeah.
In other cases, they get kind of persecuted, especially in the more celebrity Hollywood scene, and especially in the days of Me Too, and culture has changed quite a bit, but there's still this underlying understanding. Like, we all know. The example I gave of the Tiger Woods saga. He had slept obviously with hundreds of women. I find that not at all surprising. But
he's a man of status, great wealth.
No, yeah, he's the highest level of celebrity. Huge sports star. Known internationally, everything. So as it turned out, basically everywhere he went, he was sleeping with different women. They had to, because I think there's this tendency, and this was, I specifically recall under the Obama years when all of this was, and so of course, Obama would get asked all of these questions that, in reality, a president doesn't want to be bothered with this bullshit, right?
You were asking him about Tiger Woods?
Of course. I mean, Obama unfairly got asked a lot of questions that were only asked to him because he was the first black president in the United States.
What does he have to do with Tiger Woods?
He has absolutely nothing to do with it, but they wanted his opinion on all these things. A lot of things that Obama got dragged into that he shouldn't have had to give a shit about.
All right, so you're making this argument that men naturally are polygamous, and sometimes, especially when you become more successful, it is just the chances of that happening are higher. Do you think we should then be able to let women to experience these things when they're in marriage? That's the whole Hotwiffing movement. I don't know if I should call it movement or a trend. Is to let women sleep with other men so that they can be happier in their marriages.
I think
whatever
works. Right, but it goes back to how do you maintain a marriage, which is supposed to be a lifelong commitment, right? And realistically speaking, I think that a lifelong commitment doesn't work for like a large majority of human beings. I think that it is nature. And so at some point, that's why we see so much infidelity. The difference between what you're describing and infidelity is that it's not infidelity because they are...
It's an agreement.
They're making an agreement. And so my point here is, I mean, is that any better or worse than cheating? Cheating which is likely going to happen in many of these marriages, is the worst, and I would say, the worst thing, because that's being deceptive, deceiving one another and lying to one another in the relationship, versus you agreeing to something and being open about the fact that, hey, we're humans, we have these other urges that we could satisfy, and if we trust each other enough, are comfortable enough with one another, we can make that work.
We can let it work.
Again, not my thing. If I make a lifelong commitment, I'm hoping it's with somebody who is willing to accept that they're going to have temptations, but know that they're prepared to deal with those without infidelity. That being said, I'll just also say, if a relationship is deep enough and you have truly found your soulmate, your life partner, I think cheating has to be overlooked in some cases.
Okay.
Because we do know that it's human nature. and just, connections can be formed. That's kind of how we're wired. It's this idea of finding the one pure, perfect person and just being in love with them endlessly is not reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're with somebody day in and day out, that feeling wears off.
You see their mistakes, and
you see everything, but then you're also surrounded by other people, and so it's impossible, for example, to go to work every day and be with somebody at work 5 days a week and not build connections with that. That's what humans do naturally. We build connections with the people that we are around.
Spend much time with.
And so there's inevitably going to be other connections that you have. Does that mean you have to become sexual with that person? No.
Not really.
But being understanding of human nature is important. If I were in a lifelong commitment with somebody and we were to that point that we loved each other deeply enough, I think you have to get to a point of understanding and forgiving one another when necessary.
Well, Ben, I get what you're saying. And whatever works for anybody's relationship, they should do it. Life is short. But for me, hi bo. Nah. No. If you have to cheat on me, you have to. If you need to sleep with another man to feel comfortable in our marriage or in our relationship, I think it's just time to bag the fries. Just go. Yeah, you're free to go. Yeah, that is not for me. But if anybody is out there and is working out for them, well, good. But I can't. My ego is too big. My pride is too much. So yeah, thank you so much. That's it for Hotwiffing. Well, if it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, then don't.
Yeah, learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Hotwiffing.
Hotwiffing.
All
That's
right.
what they're calling it today. Gen Z and millennials.
Yeah.
They're always coming in with something new.
I only like ugly women, so I don't have to worry about that.
Let's continue.
Let's continue. All right. I did ask you if you would make a deal with the devil. Was that the first or second question I asked?
I think that was the first. You asked me
that
about
was the
it.
first.
Yeah.
So you turned down $10 billion.
No. I said a conditional no. Because right now, because of the idea of hell, my Christian values, Catholic, I'm drifting towards no.
He's a true Catholic.
But to be honest with you, I've been through a lot. Oh man, for a 28 years old, I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if that $10 billion was sitting on that table right now, my answer might be different. Yeah, because that means I get to free my people. I get to give the people I love a better life. I get to build my dreams. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think at a certain point, anyways, in this our business adventures, at a certain point, we're going to have to come across people that will give us the checks we need. And we will have to compromise certain values for that. I think that's just how the world works right now. And that's something that I'm learning as I'm growing, and I'm beginning to make my peace with it.
Sure.
Because I have a couple of deals right now, to be honest. I don't know. I'm just going to bring this here since this is unfiltered. I have a couple of deals right now that I know if I make for the organization, I might not be as free as I am. But I know this is the step that I need to get to the next level. I need to take that leap of faith. So it's not necessarily a deal with the devil, but it's not going to be the best deals ever.
Right.
Yeah. You need the money. You need the connections. You've built the infrastructure and the foundation. You have to take it. Or you go back to zero. That's
right.
how, yeah. So to an extent, I would understand someone that would take a deal just because they need that breakthrough. So making a deal with the devil right now, if the $10 billion was on the table, I doubt if I would say no. I doubt. So it was a conditional no.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, Christian values would go against materialism in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Our lives on this earth are brief, which is to say, on one hand, we should make the most of them.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's also the case that we should, spend the brief time that we have here doing good, not worrying about gaining wealth or power.
Mm-hmm.
In the overall timeline, what we do here, I mean, is what we do with our brief time in this world will be everlasting if we decide to make it that way. So the reason that question came to my mind, I will say, is because there was a recent election for judges in our neighboring state of Wisconsin. There was a very conservative Trump judge versus a more liberal judge, female candidate, can't remember her name. Was a special election, and it was big. A lot of national focus came onto this because it was determining judges and these state federal appointed judges, or not appointed, they're elected obviously because this was an election, can make a big impact. We see that in how some of Trump's policies are now getting blocked here and there based on judges making rulings on whether they are constitutional. So of course our buddy Elon was offering voters, I think it wasn't 10 billion, but he was offering some voters $2 million as a reward to vote for the conservative judge, which is not technically a legal way. I mean, that's a pretty clear-cut bribe, right? To offer someone directly a check to vote for a certain candidate. But the outcome, it didn't work out well for Mr. Musk. It was actually a pretty big landslide victory for the liberal judge in Wisconsin. But it makes you think, right? If people can be bought, right? Are we? I mean, is our country, is our democracy at a risk of being sold, basically, to those at the very, very top? And we've talked, on this subject on the show before, but what are your thoughts on influencing elections in this way? Money has always been involved in elections, as we know, but now it's just a very clear-cut case of the wealthiest man in the world trying to buy politicians who will support his agenda.
Yeah, I think there should be laws stopping that. There should be some rules that definitely puts limitations to this. However, on the topic of buying people, I think everybody has a price. The way I look at the world, every day we get up, we go to jobs we don't like to make a pay. We are being bought. Everybody's at some point is selling something to another person. It's a transactional world we live in. So, but when we get to see people like billionaires interfering in our politics directly like that and dropping money directly like that, it is really bad. It is not good for the country's image and for democracy all over. However, it is not a new phenomenon in America. It's always been a corporate-driven system in America, political system in America. It's always been corporate-driven. It's always been behind the scenes, behind the doors, handshakes, and all of that. And that's why we see this undying support for certain countries by our government. And we see all of this is all corporate interests. So it is not something new. What you just witnessed in Wisconsin is just the tip of the iceberg. It's deeper than you can ever imagine. So what is the price tag on our souls? I cannot really answer that. I don't know for sure. But it all depends on you individual and what your values are, what you stand for. Some people might argue Elon was a saint, spending money to make sure that we don't have a liberal judge that might push certain agendas on our children, on our communities. Some might argue that buying a judge is definitely is a devil's deal that should be forbidden. I'm on the side that money should not really be directly influencing policies and politics like that. I don't think that is a good idea that people get to hand checks to people to vote for certain people. It should not be happening. But did it just start today? No, it didn't start. 60 years ago, it was already happening. And that's just how our country is.
In a different fashion. Because politicians have always been influenced by money, those running for office. It just hasn't been to the point of this brazen level of just trying to buy voters as well. Because, yes, there's always been money backing certain politicians. Putting ads.
Not certain. All. Every political party, we have two major political parties in America, Democrats and Republicans. Look into where their fundings are coming from, then you will see what I'm talking about. All of them. It's always been someone sponsoring their campaigns and everything. The public has its own percentage that they donate to these political parties. But look deep into their funding. Look. It's public information.
Absolutely. You should always follow the money.
It's not just some, it's all.
Not all.
There's not a politician in America that hasn't taken a check.
Well, there are some. Bernie Sanders. I mean, there are very specific examples of
Bernie
candidates.
is part of a political party that receives donations from.
No, for his direct campaign,
for his direct campaign,
he won't take money from corporate interests.
Okay,
that's his entire thing.
Right.
And so those who sort of follow in Bernie's
ideologies and
there's some now who are following in that same path.
Okay,
like AOC. Like Ilhan Omar from
so how
right
are they
here
raising their own funds for their campaign?
Well, that's what famously Bernie liked to say at all of his rallies, and it became so popular that the crowds at his own rallies would chant it with him. His average donation to his campaign was like $27, meaning he's getting money from his actual supporters, not from corporations. And so the average amount that was donated to Bernie's campaign was $27. And so, people like me and you,
if we wanted him, then we would donate to his campaign.
So he was getting money from actual voters versus a corporation trying to buy him so that when he would get into office, then he would pass certain legislation to their benefit. And that is how largely the political system works.
That's how it actually works. When you see this Bernie Sanders case this example you just mentioned here, it is like the rare case. It is. It's not even up to 1%.
Well, and that's the reason for his popularity.
It's super
is because more and more people have become aware of how much money influences policy, and so that is what gave rise to Bernie's fame in the first place. Was that he was saying he was going against the most powerful interest in the world, the big banks, the big oil. He was attacking them directly.
That's why he was never nominated.
Well, and that's why in
he was never
2020, when he was actually putting up a good fight in the Democratic race against Hillary Clinton, a lot of corporate interests came to the Democrats and said, "You're going to lose all of us if you allow Bernie to get the nomination." They were scared because what would happen if someone like Bernie actually took office is that these corporate interests, these big banks,
he would turn the country upside down,
audited to shit. Well, every last thing that big banks are doing behind the scenes to screw us over would be uncovered. He would have investigations going.
He would go after J.P. Morgan.
He would go after all of them, and it doesn't hurt us. In the end of the day, that hurts corporate interests, but it would. I mean, like if Bernie had his way, things would be shaken up for sure. And to be honest, that's the reason that also gave rise to Trump's popularity in the beginning, is that people were fed up with how Washington politics was working. The more you understand about how policy gets done, kind of the more upsetting it becomes, because Washington it really does function on corporate interests, and those lobbyists who are at the Capitol every single day working to get bills passed in their favor. And so what some folks might not remember now is when Trump ran originally, he was stealing some of Bernie's sort of ideas because he saw how well it was working for Bernie, right? So Trump was saying things like he's going to drain the swamp in Washington and get all the corruption out of there, things like this. And that's what struck a chord with so many of these people. The same attitude that, excites people about Bernie sort of did about Trump originally, because he was using some of that anti-Washington rhetoric.
The fight for the common man, the fight for the common man's freedom, it is something that just did not start today. These systems we are seeing today and we are beginning to analyze today, we are doing this now because we have different media sources, no longer the mainstream media, and we have different opinions. And sometimes we see things now that are questionable that would have been buried back in the day. But it didn't start today. Like I always tell, I was talking to one of my friends yesterday. Actually, it's funny. Last night I was talking to one of my lady friends here in Minnesota, and I told her that this world is still exactly the same the way it was in the ancient Roman Empire, where you had all these people in the court, all this behind lobbying, all of these things. That's how the world still functions. And if you're gonna be in business and you're gonna be a business tycoon, you wanna grow. You have to live by. You have to always ask yourself one thing: what is it in it for me? What is it in it for me? That's why you see these people are always in DC trying to do all of these things, and why politicians end up in their trap. It's still exactly the way it was. One way or the other, we are all selling something. It's all a transactional world. So it's a system that I don't think is gonna be changing anytime soon. And I don't think we have anything we can do about it.
Well, the system in Washington won't change.
Global is the world system.
Sure. And I want to be clear that lobbying for certain legislation doesn't have to be a bad thing. I mean, there are lobbyists, for example, who go to the Capitol every day in Washington, and they're fighting for laws like, protecting our environment, for example. Like, you can be lobbying, you can be working directly and trying to influence the government in a positive way. And so that is the way that Washington functions, is there are people with certain agendas, and they're all going and trying to, encourage certain politicians to vote on certain bills and stuff like that. Where it gets ugly, obviously, is when there's huge sums of money involved. And the richest...
It's always involved.
Yeah, but the problem is, the most powerful and wealthiest corporations are often passing legislation that's very, very bad for the rest of the country. You have,
interest, man. It's all about interest.
No, of course.
It's all
you
about
you can always follow the money.
If you follow the money,
to understand what somebody stands for.
Absolutely.
And so, look, for example, at who is supporting Trump. Look at who is supporting, our local politicians on either side. And that will tell you who politicians are working for. And so that's why, circling back to...
I'm going to tell you something, man, before we circle back.
Yeah.
When you're growing, right? When you're climbing this ladder, you get to a certain point where you either take their check or you drown. That's how it works. As you're going up, you get to a certain point where you either take their check back to what is the price of making a deal with the devil? You either take their check or you drown. And at this point, you have to ask yourself this question: I left a village that appreciates my work. They admire me. I left a family that admires me. Do I want to go back to them as a failure, or making them proud? Maybe starting a school here, digging a well here, planting a forest here. Is it worth taking that check? Those are questions that I've been asking myself a lot lately. So I'm drifting towards, give me the check.
Yeah.
Because I can't build a school, take care of a village, if I don't have the money, if I can barely pay my rent. But if I have something as beautiful as what we are trying to do now, right? And I see a check coming, and I know if I miss this opportunity, I might never rise above this level.
Yeah, it really, really depends on who's writing that check, because
you can never really know.
You can't. Well,
do you think you can fully know a man in business? I can vouch for my friends, but when I go into a room to negotiate business with a businessman or have a political conversation with a politician, I know I'm in a room with a snake. You have to start playing the game immediately you walk into the door. It's all a game. You have to start hiding your best cards, pushing your limits right away. And these are the people you're going to have to deal with.
It's always going to be a two-way street.
And you're right. I'm talking to you right now. I'm not saying talking to the American people. You're going to have to deal with these people as you're growing in the business world. You will have to. So when you get to that point, you start seeing things not black and white anymore. You start seeing a gray area. The area where you get to let some things slide. You see some evil, you smile at it, you walk away. Because, again, evil and good, they live in the same neighborhoods. If you want to be a leader, you want to lead everything, you have to be able to see that gray area. I'm sorry.
It is gray. I mean, that's
It cannot be black and white always.
That's the nature of everything in this world. Everything in the global political scene
And business scene, political and business.
and business.
Yeah.
Which is why, I mean, we can't sit here on the show and say, in many cases, many of the issues we debate, right? It's impossible for us, or we shouldn't be saying, right?
Yeah.
This person, this figure did this, but it's justified because this other figure had done this, right?
No.
So
that's not what I was trying to get. Don't misunderstand me. I condemn.
No. I'm just saying in general, like to your point.
I condemn that already.
Nothing is black and white in this world.
No, I said sometimes it's not black and white. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't get to see that gray area until you become a man of power. Even when you get to a point where your family gets to call you every day to solve family problems.
In the case of
you will understand what I'm talking about.
South Africa, it's black and white because they're separating the black and white people. But in the case of Elon Musk's home.
No. In the case of Elon Musk right now, right, it's black and white because you cannot write a check and you hand it to people to go and vote. That's something DC should condemn. I'm sorry, but
no, absolutely.
And but in the case of South Africa, it is not. Until you get into the South African politics and you grow there before you understand the problem Cyril, the president of South Africa, is facing every day. Until you wear the shoe.
Oh, no.
Before you know where it pains him.
No, I make that joke because for our audience who may or may not know, I mean, Elon Musk's family was benefactors of the apartheid. When whites were given all of the privilege, his father was compensated. As a white businessman in South Africa, and so if you're wondering what possible reason Musk could be opposing certain policy decisions in South Africa, it's because the end of the apartheid affected his family negatively because they were a white family benefiting off of South Africa.
Well, he recently said he's going back to South Africa to mend his relationships with his countrymen because he's originally from South Africa. And
I don't think he's invited.
No, he actually is. The funny thing is, so this youth. Well, I can't read all comments online. I don't know exactly how the entire country, but what I saw was, Africans, man. Africans are always welcoming. If you do something bad to Africans, you apologize, they will always open their hands for you. That's something about Africans, and it has really worked in the past really bad for the African people. They are too welcoming. So when he said that, a lot of people were like, "Oh yeah, you're the son of the soil. Come back. We'll come and talk to us. We'll understand you." Trust me, you'll be surprised that this man lands in Cape Town or Joburg and he received a whole presidential welcome and a bunch of youth are welcoming him back home.
No, well, that I believe.
That's the thing about Africa. They are too welcoming. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it.
So yeah, back to your question. Well, the price tag on my soul is pending. We don't know for sure. It depends on what I stand to gain, what I stand to lose. And for Elon, no, you should not. That is a no. You can't pay people millions and millions of dollars to go vote directly. No. There are ways to do that.
Well, I would say to you and to our audience, think not only of what you gain from this life, but how you plan to spend eternity. Ben, once our time on this earth is done.
There's not been a decision that I've made in the past 10 years of my life that has been about me. Every sacrifice, every turn, every ideas I've cooked, it's just been about the family and the way I grew up and I saw my people living. It has not been about me. If it was about me, I don't think I'll be here. Maybe I'll be somewhere in Ibiza right now, sitting somewhere on a beach in Hawaii, enjoying a cocktail. But I'm here. You get it? It's not.
I understand.
It's not about me.
It's not a decision necessarily just to benefit yourself. Yeah. But this gets into something that we see in figures. Who's the guy who several years back who was arrested for a major Ponzi scheme?
Are you talking about? Is it the guy that was? Is it the Bitcoin guy?
Not that. It was even before Bitcoin. This was a guy.
Was he black?
No. This was an old white man. A movie was made about him. Really? Robert De Niro played him in the movie, but a very notorious case. But I mean, look, he was doing it because he wanted to give everything to his family as well. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. What's the price? It's because it's never only impacting you. Mm-hmm. at the end of the day. I mean, he took all of these people's money, their life savings, with promises of, a major return. But at the end of the day, what he was doing was just stockpiling everybody's money. It was a Ponzi scheme, a classic Ponzi scheme that eventually got busted. And
No.
He's in prison. One of his children committed suicide after that. But my point is, right, he was doing it for his family as well. Like, if he can, we all think that way on some level, right? If I can just get this, then I can do what I need to for my family. But I mean, that's a deep philosophical question, right? Is it worth the cost at the end of the day? And I don't have the answer. It's not a yes or no. It's not a simple yes or no.
It's not that simple. Yeah, but a Ponzi scheme, things like that. Man, I'm gonna be very honest with you right here. If you know the amount of scammers I know globally, you're not gonna believe it. Yeah, people that we grew up together, but there was no way for them. They ended up joining international corporations that are into scamming. I'm talking about people that would scam from Africa to Europe and back. Yeah. And will it be easier for me if I associated with them overnight? It would be like that for me. With my ideas and my brain, we could do wonders. But I can't. I cannot. Yeah, I want to make it for my family. I want to help my people, but I also want to die and maybe get a park named after me. Or maybe get a street named after me. So yeah, I have limitations. I wouldn't, yeah.
Fair enough.
All right. I don't know if we should take one more question or are we running out of time? What do you think? We should take one more question.
Yeah, we could save the next two for the next episode.
Okay. All right.
Since we like to talk on this show.
On this show. Yeah, it is because our conversations, they go into it.
Absolutely.
So, all right, you want to wrap it up for them?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone, again for joining us on this episode.
Thank you.
We want to know your thoughts on everything that we discussed today. We got into some deep questions today, moral issues, ethical issues, philosophical issues. So really interested to know what our audience thinks about these. We love your feedback. We love all the feedback that we've been receiving so far. And we plan to bring much of your feedback, much of your comments into the shows and discuss further. So thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.